What is going on, everybody? Welcome in, and today we're gonna be setting up and testing the Eastwood MIG 90 welder and their XL View auto darkening welding helmet. So anyways, let's go ahead and get this thing started. Full disclosure, guys, Eastwood did hook it up with the welder and the helmet. However, they are not paying me to make this video. Before they even reached out, I had been using Eastwood products and I really like their company. My dad used them way back in the day when he was restoring his 68 High Country Special Mustang. I've used a lot of their rust encapsulator paints over the years, and they have a lot of cool products for car restoration. And I like their slogan. It says, do the job right, because if you do it right the first time, you won't have to do it again. And they seem to have really good customer service because they actually care about what they do. Also, let me put this out there that I am not a pro welder whatsoever. I have done some Flux Core welding, but this will actually be my first time welding with MIG. The welder that I've been using is a titanium Flux 125, and I have probably saved close to $4,000 with that thing. I have repaired my motorcycle frame with that welder multiple times in different spots, and all of the welds have held up great so far, over thousands of miles. And I have done some exhaust work on the van because the catalytic converter was stolen, so I welded a new one on there. And I'll just say, learning how to weld has really paid off for me. The problem with Flux Core is that it doesn't do thin metal, and I have some rust spots on the body of the van and I need to weld in some patch panels. However, that sheet metal is very thin and it's so easy to just blow through thin steel on a Flux Core welder. And that's why I want it to switch to an actual MIG welder. But not only that, you're also gonna be able to weld a lot faster with MIG, and it's gonna do a lot cleaner job as well. Even just doing the motorcycle frame and the exhaust was kind of a pain with the Flux Core. To explain why Flux Core can't do thin metal very well, we'll start with the wire itself. And basically it's just a metal wire with a flux in the center, and that's why they call it Flux Core. But as the wire melts, the flux in the middle melts with it, and it basically floats to the top and pulls out any impurities, and it protects the molten metal from oxidation as it cools. And I think the smallest flux cord wire is 030 because they can't really make it any smaller and still have it usable. And honestly, I have no idea how they get flux inside that. It'd be interesting to see how they manufacture it. But MIG, on the other hand, uses a solid wire, so they can make it a lot smaller. This one goes down to 023. And MIG stands for metal inert gas. It actually uses a shielding gas, which is not flammable or anything like that, but it basically just displaces oxygen, because the oxygen is what makes a poor quality weld. It'll have all these little wormholes and it will just not be strong whatsoever. So basically, as you pull the trigger, it starts feeding the wire through the hose. And on the MIG, there's a little solenoid that allows compressed shielding gas all the way through here, and it kind of just fills up this cup and kind of just spews out and protects the weld. The Flux Core welder looks a little bit different because it doesn't have this cup where the gas comes out of. And it's that wire size that allows us to weld a lot thinner stuff without constantly blowing holes through it. Titanium 125 goes down to 18 gauge. Eastwood MIG 90 can go all the way down to 24 gauge. There are some pros and cons between Flux Core and MIG. Just like we talked about, the MIG can do a lot thinner material, and it's also a lot cleaner, and because of that you can weld a lot faster, because with Flux Core you have to clean the metal off after each weld, whereas you don't have to do that with MIG. Also, there's not as much splatter with MIG. The one downside is that it's not as good outdoors because you're using a shielding gas, and if it's even a little bit windy, it'll just blow that away and you'll get oxidation on your weld puddle, which is not good. You can kind of compensate for that a little bit by turning up the pressure on your gas regulator, but it's still not ideal unless there's not much wind. But on the other hand, Flux Core, you can weld in the wind, so it does a lot better outdoors. I may be wrong, but I think you can weld a little bit rusty and dirtier metal with Flux Core versus MIG, which you want it to be super clean when you're welding. Also with Flux Core, you have to clean the slag off the weld before you start welding again. The cool thing about the Eastwood MIG 90 is you can use MIG, but you can also use Flux Core wire in it as well. It's pretty easy to do. You just swap out the wire with a Flux Core wire. And with MIG, you use electrode positive, and this is the electrode cable right here. And they make it super easy. So that would be set up for MIG, and the ground would be the negative. But if you switch to Flux Core, you just take the electrode off the positive, swap it to negative, and then put the negative on the positive, because Flux Core works best with electrode negative. And there are some machines where you have to like take the side panel off and you actually have to use some tools to swap it out. But it's super nice to be able to just, you know, swap it from the front of the machine like this. This Eastwood MIG 90 will weld up to 1/8 inch. And that's really all I need. All I really do is like exhaust, which is pretty thin. And my motorcycle frame was like 18 or 16 gauge, something like that. This is what 1/8 inch looks like right here. The Flux 125 will go up to 3/16, which is a little bit thicker. So far, I've never used that setting. But whatever welder you plan on getting, make sure that it'll do the thickness that you need. The wire speed and arc volts are infinitely adjustable, and I like how this one gives you an actual measurement for the wire speed and actual arc volts, unlike my old one, which just had random letters and numbers. Both of these welders use your basic 120 volts. I don't actually have a 240 volt outlet in this garage. Eastwood does sell some pretty cool 140 amp machines. They have a 140 MIG welder and a 140 multi-process that does like TIG and stick and MIG and everything. Both of those 140s use 120 only, so that's pretty cool. And I believe those go up to 3/16. However, they're about twice as much as this machine. The MIG 90 is definitely a good value. At the making of this video, it cost about $250 and includes all of this stuff right here. And that's only $35 more than the titanium Flux 125. If I could go back in time, I definitely would have got this instead, because I could have started out with Flux Core and eventually moved up to MIG without having to get another machine. It comes with quite a bit right out of the box. Obviously you get the welder, a little tool for the tips and stuff. Comes with an extra 023 and 030 electrode, plus an 023 that's already on there. Comes with a nice hefty spool of 023 solid wire. The wire that most machines come with are pretty skimpy. They kind of just don't give you that much. I believe this is a 2-pound roll right there. It comes with the ground clamp, definitely not super heavy duty or anything, but it's really all you need for a 90. It doesn't feel super cheap or anything, but it comes with the gas regulator. So that saves quite a bit of money right there. Comes with a gas tube, and like most all entry-level machines, it comes with one of these cheapo welding masks. I would definitely not use one of these to weld with, but it's kind of nice to have. If someone wants to watch you or something, you could just hand them that. And of course, it comes with instructions. But the one thing it doesn't come with is the gas bottle. Also, a really important thing is that this Eastwood welder comes with a 3-year warranty. And I think the Harbor Freight ones only come with a 90-day warranty, which is pretty pathetic. One little thing I like about this welder versus the titanium Flux 125 is the handle. I like this better than the strap, which always seemed to get in your way. Here's the specs, and the duty cycle is 100% at 50 amps, 60% at 65 amps, and 25% at the full 90 amps. Basically, the duty cycle means it can run 90 amps 25% of the time, but 75% of the time it needs to be cooling down. But at 50 amps, you can go all day, every day. The wire type and diameter. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the helmet. And if you're just getting into welding, I would definitely not cheap out on a helmet. I would get something fairly decent. Definitely get something that's auto darkening and preferably with a large viewing angle. Really helps to see what you're doing to be able to learn. The cool thing about this one versus a lot of helmets is that it's got a true color lens. So it basically looks exactly like it should, because a lot of them have like a green tint to them. So that will be really cool to test out. Go ahead and open this thing up. Some extra lens shields and instructions. Definitely has a huge viewing area. It definitely comes in handy, especially when you want to use this as a face shield for grinding. And one thing I really like about this one versus my last one is it's got all the controls on the outside. My last one had them on the inside, so it was kind of a pain to get to. So before you start welding, make sure to take this film off. And it looks like this protector just pulls out, starting at the bottom. You definitely want to make sure you have one of these protectors in there, or else you'll permanently mess up the auto darkening part. The inside has a film as well you need to remove. The batteries are replaceable, which is nice because I've seen some of the cheaper helmets where the batteries are not easily replaceable. You basically have to break it to replace them. And basically you can take the whole auto darkening system out with this little screw at the bottom. This helmet definitely has a lot of adjustment. You can adjust it right here and right here. And then of course on the back, there's a little lock that you have to push down and then you can turn it in or out. Here's the shade guide table, and we're gonna be using light MIG, no more than 90 amps. So we'll just remember to set it to 10. There's a little shade range switch. So it's 5 through 9. But since we'll be using 10, we'll keep it there. Then when we're ready, we'll just put it right there. If you're doing grinding and you don't want it to auto darken, you just flip it down to grind. Also, when you're storing it, I would keep it on grind as well. Delay, I'll probably just put it somewhere in the middle. And sensitivity, we'll just put it around in the middle to start with. All right, I got it adjusted pretty good. And you can also adjust the tension to how much it stays up. And it's perfect. So this is what it looks like looking through the Eastwood helmet. Definitely has that true color that they were talking about. And here's what my old helmet looks like. You can definitely see that green hue. Here it is on the welding cart. And I just have a wooden block behind it, painted black, and that's just to keep it from sliding back into the tank because it is a little bit at an angle. It's really nice having these line holders. It's got an extension cord and the actual welding line on this side. I'll probably put the ground on this side as well. It's got plenty of room for all my tools. I just have them in these bags. Got some C-clamps, and these are a lot of my power tools down here. Here's the gas tank, and this is definitely one of the more intimidating parts of getting into MIG welding. However, it's pretty easy to get. You're gonna wanna get 75% argon, 25% carbon dioxide, called a silver shield. It's a non-flammable gas. It's non-toxic. However, it does displace oxygen, so keep that in mind. I got this at a general air store. They sell different kinds of gases, and they also sell a ton of welding supplies as well. I'm not sure if it's a national chain or not, but you're definitely gonna be able to find something similar near where you live because, you know, people weld everywhere. They called this the mini MIG tank, and it was fairly inexpensive. For the tank, completely full of the silver shield gas, was about $99 out the door. And the cool thing is once you get the tank, which cost about $60, you basically just pay for refills, and you just bring the old tank back and you get a new one that's fully charged. And that's only about $40 each time. Not sure how long it's gonna last, but it'll be interesting to find out. Just held on my welding cart with 2 chains that just lock in right there like that. And I went ahead and put put some carabiners to hold them together just in case that fails. It doesn't fall to the floor. Because if this thing broke open, it'd be like a torpedo. But it's definitely not going anywhere. You can weld stainless steel with this machine. However, you cannot weld aluminum. I believe you have to get the 140 to be able to do that. And you have to get a separate aluminum spool gun. And the reason is it can't push the aluminum wire through this hose because it's too soft and it'll break. So you have a separate spool gun. If I have to weld aluminum, I'm just going to use some Weld rods. These are basically brazing rods that use a low temperature, and I'll just use my MAP gas torch, and those will be pretty fun. And I will be using this for a diesel fuel tank on the van for the diesel heater later down the road. Down here, I just have some anti-spatter spray, a fiberglass blanket, a power strip. Back here, I just have a metal size gauge, so I know what I'm working with, and a little soapstone pen. Let's go ahead and hook up the gas system. I definitely would recommend wearing some safety glasses, just in case. It is a little bit dirty in there, so I'll just take a Q-tip and try to clean it up a little bit. So we want to get a nice clean seal on this thing. Let's install the included regulator onto the tank, and it's the right size. Make sure it's nice and clean where it seals on that surface. And you can insert it in and then screw this fitting in. And we can go ahead and tighten it down. Nice and snug. Now we can grab our air tube and insert the fitting on the regulator output and screw it in. And make sure that's nice and snug. So they gave us a really long air tube. We don't need this much. However, I want to keep some of it, so I'm gonna thread it down past this first chain. And then I'm gonna come back up, probably right around there. I just wanna keep some extra in case I need it for some reason. Slide on the included hose clamp, install the hose, tighten it down just like it was a fuel hose or a coolant hose. While we're getting set up, I'm just gonna go ahead and disconnect the electrode, and the ground is already disconnected. Before we crack open the tank, make sure the regulator is completely closed. There we go. We got pressure. Make sure you listen for any leaks. Now we can go ahead and open the regulator. There we go. It takes a little bit, and let's try to get it about 20 on the red. Welder plugged in, and let's go ahead and test the gas system. Let's power it on. And let's make sure the solenoid works. I hear gas coming out the tip, so we're good there. And when we activate it, you can see it drop down to about 15. All right, the gas system works. We can go ahead and power it off. Whenever you're not gonna be welding for a while, get in the habit of turning the tank completely off. And this is because there may be, you know, very, very slow, small leaks from here to there or somewhere in here. And if you leave that open for like a week or a month, it could pretty much drain the entire tank. We have an oxyacetylene torch at work, and people will forget to close the tanks, and then after like a week or a month or so, they're completely empty. So it's definitely a good way to save money, because, you know, 40 bucks to fill that thing up is quite a bit, and you have to make a trip. Next, let's load up some wire, and we can open the lid by just pushing in this little latch. Make sure it's not gonna hit anything in the back. Remove this wing nut and bushing that's keyed. And I believe this plastic part stays on the bottom. It doesn't really show it in the instructions. The bottom plate is spring loaded with a little spring washer. And this takes up to 4-inch spools. And we wanna make sure the wire comes out like this, because if it comes out like this, it's gonna be too much of an angle. The bushing goes directly on top right there. And we can snug that up. We don't want it too tight, but we do want it to hold it just enough under tension. If there's no tension, this will all unwind and it'll be a huge mess that we don't want to deal with. It is a plastic feed device, not metal, but it still should work pretty well. Go ahead and open that guy up. This is just a bearing, and this guy right there just unscrews and slides out. This is the drive roller. It's got two sizes. The bigger one is 030 and the smaller one is 023. And for reference, 0.8 is 030 and 0.6 is 023. And this wire is 023, so we're gonna have that upwards. Now for the slightly sketchy part, make sure you hold this with your finger. So you really don't want this unraveling. We want it to be straight, so we'll cut it. Grab it with some needle nose and feed it into the spring. And we should see it come out the other side. There it is. And then insert it into the spring after the drive roller. Make sure it's in the groove on the drive roller. And then we can close it. And we can turn the wire speed up a little bit. Go ahead and hit the trigger. Start feeding it through a little ways. We can go ahead and pull off the gas cup and the electrode tip. We can go ahead and crank the wire speed to the very max and unwind the cable. I would just make it as straight as possible. And just hold it down. What in the world was that? So at first I didn't actually know what was going on here because I had the wire speed set at the max and it was going super slow, and then all of a sudden it would go fast. But this machine actually won't start the wire speed you set until it sees an arc, which is actually really cool. But reading the instructions, if you hold the trigger down for 5 seconds or so, it'll go full speed, and that's just the feature so you can run the wire through the hose a lot faster. It's all the way through. We can go ahead and clip it. Make sure we're using an 023 electrode and slide that over. Screw it in. Use the included tool to snug it up. These little holes, that's where the gas comes out, and we can install the gas cup. Also guys, don't forget to put this cap on before feeding the wire through, or else you get to do it all over again. We want to make sure the wire will bend when we push it out. Now let's go ahead and hook up our electrodes, and it's got a handy little diagram in case you forget. It is DC positive. So the electrode goes to positive. We got the ground clamp, and that will go to negative. Got the welding table set up with our workpiece clamped on, and we'll just put the ground clamp right there. Let's go ahead and get our safety gear on, and make sure you have long sleeves and some good pants and boots. I actually welded it with some tennis shoes that had mesh in them one time, and I kept getting really hot embers burning my toes. So make sure you got some gloves, and make sure you're not welding next to some gasoline, and it's probably a good idea to have a fire extinguisher nearby. Nothing's around that you want to get sparks on. Use these welding pliers to kind of give you about a 1/4 inch stick out. With MIG welding, apparently you typically push. However, with Flux Core, you pull. One thing they say, if there's slag, you drag. And you want the stick at about a 5 to 15 degree angle, and the stick out is probably around a 1/4 inch. And since it's flat, it'll just be straight down. And you can just practice that. And we can go ahead and power on the welder. Turn the gas on. Our workpiece is 14 gauge. And if we look at our chart, we're using 75-25. And it's cool, you can use 100% CO2 as well. It's different settings. But since we're using this and we're using 023, follow this over to 14 gauge, 19 volts with 278 wire speed. So we're getting up there pretty high. Maximum wire speed. That's because we're using the 023. Now let's try to run our first MIG weld. Guys, that is so much nicer than Flux Core. Like, so much nicer. Flux Core would have been about burning through already. Look at that. That's not bad. Not bad at all. All right, let's do that again. And there's like no smoke and like bunch of crap everywhere. Man, I love MIG welding. I can't believe how easy that is compared to Flux Core. On the left, we have my weld, and on the right is a Ford factory weld. I did a few more beads, and I actually forgot to turn the gas on when I started, but it had a little bit of gas up until this point, and you could really tell it just sounded awful. And look at the quality of that weld. It's got all kinds of porosity. I went a little bit slower, and it looks pretty darn good right there. No idea what this white stuff is. It's very strange. Something that's not a bad idea is to use a little bit of this anti-spatter spray on the nozzle. A little bit with a steel brush just to make them all shiny, and there we go. Definitely not the prettiest looking welds, but good enough to fix something. All right, let's actually weld something together. This stuff is a lot thinner at 20 gauge, 16.3, 256. That's about 16.3, 256 right down there. Weld a T-joint, and that's a fairly good fit. Not perfect, but we'll just go ahead and tack weld it. I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to weld this in one single pass. We'll probably have to stitch weld it because it is pretty thin. And that's just kind of where you alternate sides back and forth, and you just do a little at a time. Keeps it from warping really bad and blowing holes through it. Definitely not that great, and I did blow a hole through it twice, but I repaired it. Definitely need a little bit of practice, that's for sure. Those first ones don't look too bad, and then that's when I kind of messed up. But yeah, this thin stuff, you definitely have to do stitch welding. But if you try to do this stuff with Flux Core, like, you would blow a hole through it within like half a second. So again, definitely not winning any awards, but I started to get, a little bit of skipping, and all I had to do, like near the end, was turn up the voltage a little bit. You basically just have to, play with the controls until you get it perfect. The end of it's not too bad. This is kind of a jumbled mess though. Okay, now let's try a butt weld, just like we were welding up a body panel, because that's what I need to do. All right, I think that is pretty good. There's the underside. I definitely feel confident enough to do some body patch panels. So guys, MIG welding is quite fun. I really enjoyed using the Eastwood MIG 90, and obviously I'm not a pro welder and I'm probably not the best person to be teaching welding. However, if you want to learn more about auto body restoration and welding and all that stuff, be sure to go check out Eastwood's YouTube channel. They have tons of videos on all kinds of welding and just everything auto body restoration. So be sure to go, subscribe to them. But anyways, I definitely feel confident enough to weld some patch panels out on the van, and that'll be in an upcoming video. I plan on doing a really cool camper conversion on that thing, and it's gonna take a while, but I'm pretty much gonna have videos on everything I do. So be sure to subscribe if that's something you're interested in. And thanks for watching, everybody, and I will see you next time. Peace out.